Powerful, beautiful, spirit-filled song. I truly appreciated that. So welcome, everybody. It is Sunday, October 9th, in the month where we honor Latino and Hispanic peoples. And we'd first like to lift up the people who most rightly, this land that we all live in most rightly belongs to. Mostly Chumash, also, I guess Lakota and Dakota, New Mexican tribes, and Gabrieleño, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, and Tataviam in the Los Angeles area. So we are honoring the people from those lands, unceded in many cases, if not most. I'm fortunate to live now in a place called Set. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Apologies. Seatikoi, which means sheltered from the winds, and acknowledging and honoring the springs which were of sacred importance to the Chumash in Ventureño. And thank you again, Lyla Jean Johnston. We're Johnston. Yeah, it is Johnston. We are looking forward to hearing what you have to say, more of what you have to say. In a moment, you'll see this QR code again. It leads to our giving link. You can also contribute on Venmo at JesusCollective. You may also send a check or money order to Post Office Box 1661, Santa Barbara, 93116. At the end of our session today, after our discussion, we'll be able to share communion. So just whatever you have on hand, doesn't have to be real wine or even real fruit juice, and something else to represent the body of Christ. Here's an event, and we don't have many of them where we actually get to see and hug each other. Put it on your calendars if it's not already there, November 12th. Time for eating and drinking at the Morris home in Santa Barbara. Wednesdays, we've been having some amazing discussions. Please come. We could use some more people to add, put in their 2 cents. Heartwarming and uplifting. We want everyone to know the love that we've been able to share at 7 p.m. on Wednesday nights. Next Sunday's theme, the unexplored dimensions of you and how we have changed since 2020. Here's a quote by Leonard Peltier. We are not statistics. We are the people from whom you took this land by force and blood and lies. We are the people to whom you promised to pay in recompense for all this vast continent you stole. Some small pitiful pittance to ensure at least our bare survival, and we are the people from whom you now snatch away even that pittance, abandoning us and your own honor without a qualm, even launching military attacks on our women and children and elders, and targeting, illegal even by your own self-serving laws. Those of us, our remaining warriors who would dare to stand up and try to defend them, you practice crimes against humanity at the same time that you piously speak to the rest of the world of human rights. America, when will you live up to your own principles? There's that QR code if you want to scan that for giving purposes. And thank you. The community reading will be conducted by Margie at this time. You may unmute.
To truly love is to know how to say no to the false use of power. It is to learn how to denounce the abuse of force, to avoid being enthralled by it, neither to fear it nor to pursue it.
It
is detachment from power, not in terms of being naive to its uses or unengaged in its workings, but in terms of not worshiping it, not adulating it.
This is the detachment that we see in Jesus's refusal to be intimidated by the power of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. At Jesus's trial, when Pilate asks him, "Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?"
Jesus responds,
Jesus
"You would have
responds,
no power.
"You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above.
This is to
This is
refuse
to
deify power.
This is to refuse to deify power."
To truly love is to work for a just equity of power between nations, races, and genders, and in our day-to-day relationships and transactions. It is to oppose all patterns of power over another.
In the scales that Lady Justice holds,
There
if there
is
is justice holds,
scales
scales tip in one direction or the other. This is as true in our most intimate relationships
as it is in the
as it
great
is in the
affairs
great
of
affairs of nations.
nations.
Love is never about one partner dominating the other. True justice is never about coercing the other. It is only truly attained when the two are able to say yes to each other and to conjoin in ways that honor each other. That is why true love and true justice require consent. They do not ignore the free choice of the other.
Which is
why it is as
impossible for
impossible
one
for one
nation
nation
to impose
to
true
impose
justice on
true
another,
justice on another, or for one people
for
to
another people,
dictate what is
as
best
it
for
is
another
for a
people,
lover to claim true bliss
as
if
it is
sexual
for a
union
lover to claim true bliss if sexual union has been forced on another.
Now, Shella will lead us in prayer.
So grateful to be here. So grateful to be alive today. So grateful to see everyone that is here. So Holy Spirit, we invite you into this space. We invite you into wherever we are on this planet, wherever we are, we invite you into it. Heavenly Creator, we thank you for all of the alarms and the warnings that we have received, that Mother Earth has given us, that all of the warnings, all of the signs. All we have to do is just open our eyes and our hearts to what you're saying. And so we're so grateful that you're giving those warnings to us. Help us to ask for forgiveness and to forgive so that we can come together and address those warnings. Come together as your creation, doing what it is you'd have us to do, serving our purposes, whatever they are on this earth. And then we thank you for regeneration of your creation, your people. We thank you that it is your desire to restore. And so we just thank you for all of this, and we give you praise. Open our hearts to the words that the Spirit will speak to us today, and help us, Lord, to be surrendered to you, surrendered to your will. And we thank you in Jesus' name.
All right, let's take a brief moment to welcome one another into our day, our lives, our week. Welcome back, everybody. We are in store for a treat. Diane mentioned that we heard Lyla speak a little earlier today, and it was thoroughly transformative and enriching. So we are glad to be able to gather, experience with everybody here the liberating words of Lyla June, who is an Indigenous public speaker, artist, scholar, and community organizer of what we have known as Navajo, Cheyenne, and also European lineages from Taos, New Mexico. Her message focuses on Indigenous rights, supporting youth, traditional land stewardship practices, and healing intergenerational and intercultural trauma. She is currently pursuing a doctoral degree at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, in Indigenous studies with a focus on Indigenous food systems revitalization. She blends her background, her undergraduate studies in human ecology at Stanford University, graduate work in Native American pedagogy at the University of New Mexico, and the indigenous worldview she grew up with to inform her perspectives and solutions. Her internationally acclaimed presentations, like what you saw earlier, are conveyed through the medium of poetry, music, and speech. So let's allow ourselves to really be attentive and to allow ourselves to be challenged, changed, and thereby activated by the words of Lyla June. And I should say that I had not heard of Lyla June until just a few months ago, but my baby sister, Trina, who's on here now, made me aware of her, and I'm very grateful. And so take it away, Lyla June. We're so glad. Can we all give her a thank you and a welcome?
Thank you so much. Y'all are super, super sweet. I'm so honored to be here. I had a great time with the previous group as well. So before I begin, I just want to introduce myself in the traditional manner. Which means greetings where the sky and the earth meet, my relatives and my people. We're always taught to see everyone as our people, no matter who they are, where they're from, or what language they speak, or what they look like. They're all our people. And that even extends beyond humans. You know, the trees are our people. The winged ones are our people. The ones with the fins and the fishes are our people. You know, even the bugs are our people. So Dene, is the name of my nation. You know, so we, when you translate Dene, it means the people. So, and we even extend that term beyond just humans. We say the Kos Dene, the cloud people, the Sont Dene, the star people, and the Bed Dene, the sheep people. It's everyone's a person. But yeah, so traditionally we introduce our clans. So first I would say, Nanisht Ejitachitni Nishlan. I'm from the Nanisht Ejitachitni clan of the Dene Nation. And so Dene people, which are also incorrectly known as Navajo, that's not our word, it's a colonial word. We have hundreds of clans, and you get your clan from your mother. So, in American culture, you get your last name from your father. In my mother's culture, you get your last name from your mother. So, Nanisht Eje Chachitni Nishlan, that's my clan. And then your second clan is your father's clan, which, comes from his mother. So your father's mother is really the clan you name second, which is the Nahlane, or the Tsessis, or the Cheyenne is what we call it in English. Southern Cheyenne is my father's mother's clan from Anadarko, Oklahoma. New Mexico, Lyla June, so my other two clans, my mother's father is the Salt clan of the Dene, and then my father's father's of the European clans. So I'm kind of a mixture of clans, as most of us are. And I come from Taos, New Mexico, and in that manner I present myself as a Dene woman. So getting into our topic today, I'm really excited because I think this is a really important and fruitful, and it's a huge opportunity for us as Christians to change the world and to understand ways in which we can become activated to really, really rupture the system from within in a way that is healing and loving and courageous and truthful and humble all at once. You can heal things and change things with that power of love and truth. Love and truth together are a powerful force. sometimes people have truth, but they don't say it lovingly, you know, and some people are very lovingly, but they don't want to look at the truth. But when we bring them together, it can be very, very powerful, very changing. So decolonizing Christianity, to me, you know, I said this on the previous call, is that we have to understand the colonial roots of Christianity, or rather, the root of Christianity is actually not colonial at all. It's Christ. It's beauty. It's love. It's fighting for others. It's standing up for what's right. It's loving unconditionally. It's forgiving people who are nailing you to wood. You know, it's beyond our comprehension how gorgeous the root of Christianity is. And what I was talking about, you know, in the last call is how that beauty, that inexplicable, ineffable, gorgeous love was then appropriated and tragically weaponized as a tool of colonization. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mentioned Constantine. You know, Constantine was a Roman emperor in the 300s, about the year 300. And so what happened was Constantine is said to have had a vision, right, where he saw a cross in the sky and heard a voice say, "In hoc signo vinci," meaning in this sign you will conquer. And so Vinci, you know, to vanquish, to conquer others. And this was sort of twisted into this religious crusade, you know, this religious civilizing process that as long as I have Christ, I have a license to seize other people's lands. I have a license to, I mean, frankly, to murder them. And I have a license to conquer. And so we all know on this call that is not what Christ was about. You know, it's the opposite of what Christ was about. But this is one of the big turning points where, you know, what I say is that one of the largest instances of cultural appropriation in history is when Constantine appropriated Christian culture and weaponized it as a tool of domination and turned it into a means of acquiring lands, a moral justification, right? At the end of the day, there's so many different iterations of this throughout time and space where people do really horrible things and they have to find some moral justification for their actions, right? It can be religious superiority, which is what Constantine did. It can be cultural superiority, right? Like, oh, we're more civilized than these stupid Indian savages, so it's okay if we kill them all because they're not really human. You know, it's a moral justification of just, we're just superior. Then there's the technological justification, right? Like, oh, well, these people don't even have the plow, so they're not even using the land. So it's okay if we take it, because at least if we take it from them, it won't be wasted anymore. These are real justifications that colonizers use to appropriate native lands right here where we're standing. And so the way that we can decolonize Christianity, from my perspective, is we can understand the ways in which this beloved spirit, you know, of Christ, who came to teach us so much, was then turned into and appropriated for the project of colonization. So Constantine was working in the year 300 or so, right? Conquering European lands, conquering African lands, conquering the general vicinity, right? And doing so in unspeakably violent ways, right? And in ways that entrenched systems of hierarchy, caste systems, class systems. That was 300, right? So this is 1,000 years before Spain then did the exact same thing to the people of Mexico, to the people of South America. And 1,000 years before the British did the same thing to my people in what we now call the United States of America, where, just 2 generations ago, my grandmother was in a Christian boarding school where they, by law, took all of our children in 1868. They took all of our children and forced them into boarding schools by law. And so age 6 to 16, we had no control over our children anymore. This is the Navajo Nation, the Dene Nation. And this is true for all the other 573 tribes in the USA. We lost our children and they were forced to become Christian, And so this way of conquest by virtue of this moral justification of religious superiority is so entrenched into the Christian movement within indigenous lands. So I think we as Christians, and I don't necessarily identify as solely Christian or fundamentalist Christian, I should say, but I'm Christian in the sense that I love Christ and I think he's amazing and I think he taught us incredible things, and I want to be more like him every single day of my life. In that sense, yes, I'm a Christian, but I do not view it as the only way to be. And that's the thing that really harmed our indigenous cultures, obliterated our languages, our spirituality, our ways of knowing, because part of the monoculture of Christianity is that there is just one way to the Creator, and it is through Christ. And all other ways are not just invalid, they're dangerous, they're heathen, they're satanic. So all of my people's sacred sites where we would pray in the same way that Christ would pray on the mountain, that's what we would do. We would go pray on the mountain. That's who we were. When he would go into the wilderness, quote unquote, to find peace, to find his visions, to communicate with the Creator. And that's what we do all the time. That's what we do. We go out and we fast, under a tree for 4 days. That's and so, but those sacred places that we prayed to, they're called like Devil's Tower or Devil's Lake or Devil's Canyon. The whole map of the US has all these places called Devil's whatever, and they are indigenous sacred sites that Christian deemed as, well, it's not praying in this way that we deem as valid, so therefore it's heathen, it's dangerous. So that's another way we can decolonize Christianity, is not just recognize and be aware of the ways in which Christ was used by colonial powers to justify their conquest of native lands, but also to understand that we can decolonize Christianity by honoring that there are many ways to honor the Creator, and that they are not antagonistic to one another. They are complementary to one another, and that it's not a mutual exclusivity, right? We don't have to just do this or just do this. We can do them both. They can walk together. They can coexist, and they can strengthen each other. And so there's all of that. Now, when we talk about being sensitive to place, what I mean by that is, as Christians, we need to, in my opinion, understand we are practicing our faith on indigenous homelands. We are practicing our faith on stolen land. So I'll give you an example. Let's take Alabama. Alabama, I've lived there for many years in the past. I love Alabama. And the Muskogee Nation and the Yuchi Nation were removed. I mean, forced on a death march out of Alabama. They now live in Oklahoma. That's where they are right now. To this day, they still have been dispossessed of their home. I mean, hundreds of thousands of acres. Not a single cent was paid. Not only were they not paid, they were put on a death march. Thousands of them died along the way to get, they call it the Trail of Tears, right? So now let's say we open a spiritual practice in Alabama. Maybe it's a church, maybe it's a beloved community such as this, who knows? And by no fault of our own, because the American school system doesn't teach us this, but by no fault of our own, we don't understand that this is the historical context we're practicing our faith on, that we are practicing faith on stolen land. And there are people in Oklahoma living like refugees today. If you go to those reservations, they are not a pretty sight. It is not a fun place to live. We're talking extreme poverty. We're talking extremely high mortality rates. We're talking 50% diabetes rates. We're talking people living in third world conditions in the United States of America on places called reservations. And okay, you get a casino. So what, is that our payment? Like, and not the casinos make us sick too. And they make everyone around us sick. And yet we're dependent on this as our means of having food to eat. And so we're in this, almost done here, about 5 more minutes. And so we're in this situation where we as Christians can practice our faith with the awareness that, for example, for in Alabama, that we can be a part of the solution. We can be a part of the repatriation of lands. You'll be happy to know that the Muskogee Nation recently purchased over 1,000 acres in central Alabama and has turned it into a language immersion eco-village where they are revitalizing their language, they're reconnecting to their homeland, they're reconnecting to their traditional trees that are there, because they can't find those trees in Oklahoma. They have whole ceremonies around trees that only grow in Alabama. So they're reconnecting to the ecology, to the spirituality, to the ceremonies that surround this ecological place. And what you have is that going on. We can be a part of that solution. So here we are in this Chumash context, right? This Tongva context, where we are, whether we like it or not, whether we mean to or not, we are squatting on stolen Chumash Tongva lands. It's just the sad reality. We're not trying to do it. We're not doing it intentionally. We're not trying to be complicit in any negative historical context. We're not trying to be the bad guy. We're not, and none of us are. And we also, when we're sensitive to place as Christians, we understand that practicing Christianity in Chumash territory, aka Santa Barbara, is not the same as practicing Christianity in Duwamish territory, aka Seattle, because we are accountable to a different set of people. We are accountable to a different historical legacy. On the last call, someone mentioned the missions that dot the whole West Coast. The San Luis mission, the Santa Barbara mission. I don't even know all the missions, but all of these churches where, when this used to be met, indigenous peoples were enslaved there, held captive there, systematically abused there, the women systematically raped there, just really challenging things, forcefully converted to Christianity. And then when you have that Spanish layer of colonization, then you have the American layer on top of that, right? Which is the Hollywood layer, where we basically have this California dream. Everyone's coming here, having a great time, drinking cocktails, but we're just re-entrenching the dispossession of Chumash peoples of their lands, accidentally oftentimes. And so what happens in this context is that the Tongva and the Chumash are often forgotten. And so how do we as Christians not perpetuate those legacies where Chumash peoples, and they're right here. In fact, the necklace I'm wearing, they gave me this. They're wonderful people. If, you know, part of being sensitive to place in my opinion is educating ourselves about the native nation whose land we're standing on. For my PhD, I got to write like 40 pages on the Chumash. I'm totally obsessed. And what I found was they hunted sea otters out of the Channel Islands for 1,500 years, or 11,500 years straight. That's how old this civilization is. 11,500 years straight. We find otter bones in the archaeological record at these hunting sites. They organized incredibly sophisticated societies. They were not savages or primitive. They had and still have a gorgeous culture. They have incredible sailing technology, incredible fishing technologies, incredible relationships with the swordfish, with the kelp, with the abalone, with the otters. I mean, what the seafood breadbasket that they managed here in Santa Barbara is phenomenal, just absolutely beautiful. And that whole history has been taken away from them. And to this day, Chumash people, they don't have a land base, a substantial land base. And so, for example, how could we, as this beloved community, how could we be a part of returning lands to Chumash peoples? You know, to me, that's being sensitive to place. Whether it's joining meetings where they're already talking about that. I'm going to give you a few resources here right now. And I know I'm out of time, so I'll jump off here in a second. But you know, just thinking about ways we can be in solidarity with Indigenous peoples of wherever we're standing. So being sensitive to place means that to me. So I'll open it up for a few questions. I'll you know, be here another 5 minutes or so, and I'll put a few resources in the chat for y'all to, you know, explore if you'd like to learn more.
Hi, Lyla June. Thank you. It's good to see you. I feel honored to hear from you, and each time I hear from you, I learn so much and just appreciate your wealth of knowledge and what you bring, what you share. When I was hearing from you earlier this year, you spoke to the ways in which you talked about your own lineage and the ways in which the government has some limitations on the way in which you can continue as a people. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I don't feel like I have the right words, but I found it really impactful and amazing. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
The ways in which the American system has limited our ability to practice and be what we are.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very multifaceted answer, and it's a wonderful question. One of the ways that they've made it challenging is that our religions were prohibited until 1978 with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. So in the home of the free, land of the free, home of the brave, where we prided ourselves on religious freedom of the pilgrims and what have you, it was illegal for us to practice our ceremonies. And until the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978 did we have federal protection to practice our ceremonies. So for example, in Seattle, the potlatch was prohibited. You could go to jail for doing a potlatch ceremony. And all the potlatch ceremony was giving away food. Like, why are they so scared of us giving away food? And of course, capitalism's scared of people giving away food. But anyways, the federal government would come into our sweat lodges and interrupt our ceremonies in the middle and kick us all out of the sweat lodge in the 1960s and 70s. So 1978 it was legal for us to pray again. That's how recent we're talking. In the Declaration of Independence, it is written, a lot of things are written, but they say, protection from the merciless Indian savages. That's what we're called in the United States Declaration of Independence. Still to this day, it has not been reworded or rewritten or acknowledged that this is how we are framed. This is how when our children read that, imagine if your children read the Declaration of Independence and it said, the merciless white savages. Imagine if it said, the merciless Black savages. And that's what your children had to read every time they looked at the Declaration of Independence. Our kids have to do that. And they have to face the fact that when they walk in the door, they're already going to be labeled as primitive, stupid. Maybe we're spiritual and environmental, but that's all we get. We're not allowed to be intelligent. We're not allowed to be PhDs. We're not allowed to be film directors. We're put in this little tiny box of what America will see us as. And so we're constantly, and I know everyone on this call faces this in their own way, where we're constantly trying to break out of these boxes and say, no, that's not what we are, So there's that, the constant social stereotyping and pressure. The language extinction, it was, if children spoke their language in these boarding schools, the US government would revoke funding, So I hate to be Debbie Downer here with recounting all the problems that Native people have, which are myriad, but there's just so much to overcome in these situations. And it's more like, in what ways does the American system not obstructing our expression of who we are? It's like, it's not what ways are they, it's like, in what ways are they not? And that is changing. There is some good news. I mean, we have Deb Haaland appointed to the Secretary of the Interior in the cabinet. She didn't endorse me when I ran for office, but it's okay. I forgive her. But she, has now made it a mandate that all national park systems integrate traditional ecological knowledge of the local nation that the park is sitting on. This is exciting. They don't know how to operationalize it. Everyone's confused. They don't know how to do that, but the sentiment is really wonderful. So we are having wins. We're having a lot of wins every day, and but it's an uphill battle every day. So obviously, to fully answer that question would take a lot longer, but I hope that I, touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think when we spoke, you were living with your grandmother. Are you still?
Yeah, still living with her. Yeah.
I think, again, having that living history and for her to share her own experiences is pretty tremendous. In thinking about your research and putting together all that you have in telling the history of Native peoples, has it been easy to access? Has it been like, where have you been able to discover the information that you know, and is it easily accessible? I feel like each time I talk to you, I feel like there are things that I should know that I don't know. And I think, wow, why don't I know this? Why don't it feels like information, even living here in California, it should be knowledge for me. And I feel so ignorant. So again, I'm just wondering, is it cover up? Is it accessibility? What do you think?
Yeah, I think don't beat yourself up too much about that, because it's systematic. We have all been systematically miseducated about Indigenous peoples. It's the education system has very purposefully eclipsed our stories from the record. That doesn't mean we're powerless, though, to remain ignorant, or maybe ignorance is a strong word, but in other words, that even though it's systematic, and each of us, and even myself, I feel have been educated away from the truth very intentionally, we still have the power to find that truth for ourselves. So I think that the number of resources, however, to understand more about Indigenous cultures are not lacking. It's more of a problem of, do people know those resources exist? And B, do people have time, frankly? Is it a priority for them to learn about these things? And apparently it is, because we're all here. Do people have time to read, Roxanne Dunbar's new book called The Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States? Do people have time for that? It's an audiobook too, if you don't like reading, because I don't like reading too much. But there's no shortage of ways to learn. And I've given a few resources here. I'll give some more. I know that Linnea has a question. That's going to be the last question, if that's okay. I have to jump off, but I did want to say briefly before your question that I want to acknowledge that a lot of people on this call are likely have Indigenous roots. Obviously, to whatever continent that some of your ancestors came here from, but also to this land. I really want to speak to this beautiful movement of Afro-Indigeneity that's popping up, where living in Alabama, I saw a lot of white folks, saw a lot of Black folks, but they were all, I would say like 80% of them had Native grandma, Native great grandma. And I just want to give people permission on this call to honor that. I want to give people permission to, like, I see you, I don't see you as, oh, you're like, I see you as my Indigenous relative, and I don't care what phenotypically we look like on the outside. Living in Alabama, I had a lot of friends who phenotypically look like Black Americans. But when you ask and dig down, they're part Muskogee, they're part Creek, they're part Chickasaw, they're part Choctaw. And I just want to honor that. And a lot of folks who looked white, my father looks very white, but he has Southern Cheyenne, in him. And so to honor that, and also to honor the fact that without a lot of our African relatives who came, we were getting obliterated. Like 98% of our nations were dying to disease and other things. And so when we intermarried with Black folks, our lineages went on, because we had a genetic bottleneck. Imagine 98% of your village dies off. You'd either marry your cousin or marry your cousin. So our African relatives had a lot of similarities. They came from rooted cultures, from ecological cultures, and we understood each other. And we had children. And a lot of those children are here. The descendants are here today. So I think it's beautiful. And we as white natives, I'm half white, we are also, I want to give us permission to claim our Indigenous roots, and also understand that it comes with that I have white privilege. I don't look super white, but I have a lot of the resources from that community that maybe a full-blood Native person wouldn't have, or a Black Native person wouldn't have, an Afro-Indigenous person. So acknowledging, as white folks who are also Native, acknowledging our Indigenous roots and our privilege simultaneously has been a great joy for me, has been a great journey for me to, have my white side constantly engaged in paying reparations to my Indigenous side has been joy. So anyways, Linnea, let's have your question, and then I'm going to jump off. And it's just been so wonderful being with all of you. And you're on mute. There you go.
It's been wonderful listening to you and learning from you. Thank you for the links, and anything else that you can think of, to give to Pastor Moore, that would be greatly appreciated. We also communicate with a couple of other groups, justice groups in the Ventura area, who are burning to to do something. We do the land acknowledgements, and then we sit there and go, yeah, here we sit on this land, and what are we going to do about it? So you've given some ideas, and anything else, like other people who speak and mentor and so on, just, pass those on. And I sure appreciate the links you put in the chat. And thank you again.
Yeah, that's a great point that we talked about on the last call is, the land acknowledgement is an interesting one. And I do like it. I like it that it's happening because 5 years ago, people weren't doing that. And I feel like it seeds a consciousness. Now, the debate about it is like, okay, if I go to your house and I kick you out of your house and I throw you on the streets for no reason, maybe just because I have a better religion than you, and so you don't deserve your house. And then I say every time before dinner, I make an acknowledgement of like, this used to be Linnea's house, and then I eat my food, and then we just keep going. That there's that critique of the land acknowledgement that it's like we're acknowledging that this land is stolen. Okay, what are we going to do about that? Am I just going to continue to live in Linnea's house? Am I going to talk to Linnea about ways that we could coexist in this house? Am I going to talk to Linnea about how I can give the house back and how I can be a guest in her house? What are we going to do? So obviously not all of us have the power to return Indigenous lands. We could want to, but what land do we have to give? We might have our personal home, but like, how are we going to operationalize that where we're not going to? So I understand that it's hard to walk the talk of a land acknowledgement when you don't have the power to return lands. But we as a collective can be engaged in that process. And if you are engaged in that process with, like, for instance, the Sacred Places Institute, I think it's a great organization for this collective to say, hey, how can we volunteer with you guys? We don't want anything. We don't want to convert anyone. We just want to be of service the way that Christ was of service to his people. We want to be of service to your people, so that could be very beautiful. And if you do that, then the land acknowledgement becomes deeper. It's there's almost like tears of sincerity or tears of engagement. Like the land acknowledgement alone is a little bit half-hearted. You could argue that. But if there's a level of engagement where this group is having these conversations with Tongva Chumash people, talking to Sacred Places Institute, you could tell her I sent you. She's a wonderful person. She's actually the one who gave me this necklace. Then how do we then when we give the land acknowledgement, it has a deeper level of sincerity. And then maybe the top tier is like these churches that are literally giving their lands back, their land holdings. There's some churches that have given hundreds of acres back to Indigenous peoples. Then you do a land acknowledgement, no one can say crap to you because you walked the talk. But I still think even that lowest tier is good because it's a beginning, and it wasn't happening 10 years ago, and it's seeding a consciousness that, oh, we're on Indigenous lands. So I appreciate all of you so much. I'm sorry to rush out. I have to catch a flight. But so nice to be with you all for just a little bit of time. And I hope I can see you all in person sometimes.
So thank you so much.
Yes.
We are grateful for what you've shared, and for us to be in community with you is a blessing. So God bless you, and thank you again.
Have a wonderful day.
You.
Okay, bye. Blessings.
Bye, Lyla.
God bless you.
Thank you, Trina. Let's have communion, everybody. Wow. I kind of feel like we should do a retreat for about 6 months.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
No, they're
Wasn't
building a
it?
cultural center, the Chumash up right there across from the casino. So that might be a place for us to have a field trip one day.
Yes. Good thought.
To what Barbara just put in the chat, we could tell the truth about them.
What was that? Oh, we can
Oh,
tell the truth. Yeah. Well,
you
Just
know,
wondering if there was any groups that were actually trying to do. I wanted to ask her, like, what, I mean, they're basically like museums that for enslavement and abuse. I mean, and classes still go there for field trips. And it's so local. There's Lompoc, there's San Luis Obispo, there's Santa Barbara. I mean, we have it
As-
surrounding us.
as a kid, when we would go there to the different missions for our field trips, because I think I think it's fourth grade that I don't know how much the curriculum has changed and all of that, but we would be those kids. Like, I remember Jesus getting in trouble, and I went to like a way more conservative school because I transferred in that year, and just speaking truth about those institutions. And then as I got older and knew, other little kids, who, even my own family members that didn't grow up with the exposure to truth and history and the importance of having understanding about these things, I would still say, you too, Carolyn, I would still say, like, do they still teach all the lies about the missions? Like, I see it's still a project, because I noticed that you built one, for your school project and stuff, but is there any acknowledgement of the lies? Do you bring it up? Do you even know about it? And just like having those conversations, whether it be with younger people or the older people that are teaching them, and continuing to be that voice. I think it's really important, because the esteem for those places, it hasn't gone away, and we should just all be voices that speak truth to what they're really about. That kind of starts something.
Well, thank you for that, Hasmin. Thank you, everybody. When we do this, we remind ourselves in communion that we are believing not just in Jesus, we're believing with Jesus. We are working together, even if it costs everything, because we believe in the reward. We believe in the benefit outweighing the cost, the resurrection superseding the suffering and the death. And so let us have communion. Whatever you have handy, you may use that. This is the body and the blood of our help, our hope, our Redeemer, our deliverer, our advocate. And may God give us great advocacy in these times. Would you eat and drink? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. Keep inviting folks and shaking one another up. And I hope to see as many as possible joining us with Caroline on Wednesday. All right.